Aloha, everyone. This is Rob Hack from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, often just called HPEC. As you know, we are a 501c3 nonprofit headquartered in Honolulu, and we're very closely aligned with the U.S. Department of Commerce. All of our board members, of which there's 35 now, are vetted and appointed by the U.S. Commerce Secretary. And we also have a very close relationship with the Department of Commerce, and our executive secretary by statute is John Holman. He's the lone commercial service, I should say, officer in Honolulu. And he's a critical contact for any of our companies that are joining, and I'm happy to share his contact information later with everyone. Today, we're very fortunate to have assembled a great team from Australia and New Zealand of U.S. commercial service officers and market specialists, as well as foreign agriculture service specialists, all down under in it's early morning for them on Thursday or early afternoon. So I'd like to thank them for taking time out of their busy days for being here. As you're also aware, the Hawaii Pacific Export Council is able to put on these series of webinars and seminars and one-on-one mentoring sessions because we receive a grant from DBET, who in turn has received a grant from SBA in Washington, D.C. as part of the HISTEP program, or the State Trade Expansion Program. In Hawaii, that's rebranded by DBET as the HISTEP program for the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program, which you'll hear more about in just a minute. But with that, I'd like to thank all of our speakers, welcome all of our attendees, and we are covering doing business and exporting to Australia, New Zealand, and you'll hear shortly a little bit more about some new offices that have been opened there in Papua New Guinea, often just called PPG, as well as Fiji. So that's very exciting to learn about those markets. As you can imagine, Australia, especially New Zealand and others, have a close relationship to Hawaii. We have lots of tourists coming from these markets as well as exports to these markets because they have a lot in common with our beach culture here in Hawaii, and a lot of the products that are sent to Oceania are often viewed as being very high quality for our agricultural products. It's organic and what have you, but we'll cover all of that in a lot more detail. As I mentioned, we receive a grant from DBET, and with that, I'd like to introduce Jamie Lum. She's a manager at DBET who oversees the HISTEP program, and she'll talk more about the HISTEP program as we close in 2024, and she'll allude to what's going on for the 2025 cycle, which will start October 1st with the new government fiscal year. So, Jamie, please tell us more about HISTEP.
Aloha, everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar today. Mahalo to Rob and to the team from Down Under that has joined us today to share information with all our companies that may be interested in exporting to these markets, Australia and New Zealand. And it's exciting to hear, yes, about the Papua New Guinea and Fiji. So, we just recently, just a few months ago, finished hosting the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture. So we had a large contingency from Aotearoa, as well as people from Australia and from Fiji and Papua New Guinea. So it was a fantastic event. And I just want to throw that out there because that's another project that I worked on. But anyway, we're here today about HISTEP, and as Rob mentioned, it is we administer on behalf of the state of Hawaii our state trade expansion program, otherwise known as HISTEP, which we receive funding for from the SBA. Basically, it's a comprehensive export development program to help our Hawaii-made products and services be sold worldwide. So the goals of the program are, to help increase our export revenues to Hawaii by selling, these products and services worldwide. We also want to see increased number of Hawaii companies that are exporting. And then, of course, we'd like to see more markets. We'd like to penetrate more markets with our Hawaii-made products and services. So we do this with basically three components of our program, and of which this webinar is part of that. Our what we call our export readiness program, which gives companies information about exporting. Whether you're a new to export company or a company that's already exporting, you are eligible for HISTEP as long as you meet the criteria of being a small business in accordance with the SBA, which for most companies they will qualify, because basically it's any company that has under 500 employees. So as we know, the majority of our economy is made up of small businesses. So most companies will qualify for this. You also have to basically have a product or service that is at least 51% US made. And in Hawaii, we do try to give priority to those products and services that meet that as a Hawaii made product. So again, 51% standard. Part of the export readiness is, as I mentioned, we put on webinars such as this one today. We do work with the Hawaii Pacific Export Council and with Rob, so we thank Rob for being our partner in this. We have topics such as today's, which are market specific, so companies can learn about what the opportunities may be for their product or service in these particular countries. We also have sessions that address specific export topics. For instance, last week we had a webinar about intellectual property protection when exporting. So, that's just an example of one session. We've done some on export financing, on doing international trade shows. So just to give you an idea of the kinds of information that we're hoping to present to companies when they join our webinars. Also, part of our export readiness program is one-on-one business advising session with one of our partner organizations. So in addition to the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, we do work with the small business development centers. We work with our women's business center, which in Hawaii is the MINC, the Patsy T. MINC Center. We also work with our veterans business center, and locally with our program called Innovate Hawaii, which is our manufacturing extension partnership. They represent Hawaii in that MEP net, so they help manufacturers. So when a company submits a registration form for HISTEP, what we do is we will assign the company to one of our partner organizations where they can have at least one session with one of our partner organizations to talk a little bit about their company and what their export goals are. And then they can, through our partners, they can receive a little bit more information about HISTEP and perhaps some of the activities that may be suitable for the companies to participate in. So that's really our export readiness. We hope that for a company that doesn't have an export plan, that's one of the things we do ask when a company registers: do you have an export plan? We advise companies to put one together so that you have a roadmap for exactly what it is you want to do, what market you want to get into, and how you want to approach that. And so hopefully these sessions, as well as our partner organizations, can help give companies enough information to put together an export plan, or perhaps tweak one that they may already have. So that's one component. Second component is what we call our market entry and expansion activities. These would be trade shows, consumer shows. We are also looking at possible e-commerce platforms that we can help our Hawaii companies be a part of. What we do is we subsidize the majority of the cost for these activities, and then we will recruit companies to be part of it. So for instance, last month, we went to the Tokyo International Gift Show. So we will purchase booth space, and then we will put out an announcement and then start recruiting companies to be part of our Hawaii Pavilion. And in this way, we hope to make it affordable for our small businesses to be part of these large trade shows. Uh, we do charge a participation fee, but I would say it's about maybe a quarter of the cost of what it would be for a company to go into one of these large trade shows on their own. So we're trying to make it affordable. And then we also find that there is an advantage to being part of a Hawaii pavilion and being part of really the overall Hawaii brand, so that we go in as one big group and find that that's an advantage. Companies have found that to be an advantage for them in going to these trade shows. So that's our market expansion and market entry and expansion portion of HISTEP. And then the last component is what we call our company assistance. And this is where companies can apply directly to us for funding to help them support some of the activities that they've laid out in an export plan. And that is something that we do require when a company puts in an application for company assistance, that they have an export plan and they have a budget. We want to see that the company has thought about the market that they're planning to go into, how they plan to go about it, what activities they're going to engage in, what some of their targets, sales targets might be. We do ask for that. And so it's just so that we know that the company has really sort of thought out what it is that they want to do. For companies that are new to export, they can apply for up to $5,000. And for a company that is what we call a market expansion company, one that's more advanced or experienced exporter, they can apply for up to $15,000. And these funds can be used for airfare, for trade show costs, for any kind of services that they might want to use from the U.S. commercial service, such as Gold Key or those types of services. They can use it for product testing if they're going into a market that in which they have a product that needs to be certified by that government. Their product may have to go through certain types of testing, and that costs money as well. You can use it to translate your website, to establish an e-commerce website for international sales. You can use it for digital marketing in the market that you're looking at getting into. So there are a number of things that these funds can be used for. So that is, again, what we call our company assistance. It's awarded on a competitive basis, just so that companies know that. We have an evaluation committee that goes through the applications and evaluates them and ranks them. So that's how funds are awarded. So any company that's interested in HISTEP would need to go to our website, and I know Rob will show that at the end. It's invest.hawaii.gov, and if you go under the exporting tab, it'll give you all the information about HISTEP. As Rob mentioned, we are starting our next cycle, so we're gearing up for 2025. So right now we're updating the website. So if you go on, it says that registration is closed. So by the end of this month, we'll have our new registration forms available, so companies can register. And then I just want to make a distinction. There's HISTEP registration, which doesn't cost companies any money to register, and it doesn't obligate companies to really participate in anything. It just gives us information about your company and is a signal that you're interested in exporting. If you're interested in company assistance, that is a separate application process. So I just really want to make sure that I make that point. I also want to mention that we are going to have HISTEP kickoff events on Oahu, on Hawaii Island, both in Hilo and Kona, on Kauai and on Maui. So those will be coming up towards the end of this month. And so again, we're updating all of that information now. Actually, I do have a full set of slides that explain HISTEP in a little bit more detail. Rob will send that to all of our attendees. We'll also include the information in there on the kickoffs. So I'll just stop there. Thank you very much again, for your attention and for attending today's session. And if you have any questions, I will be sticking around in case anyone wants to ask anything.
Great. Jamie, thank you. Mahalo. And as a reminder to the audience, we have a bunch of speakers today. So please save your questions to the end, and you can type them in along the way in the Q&A function, although I know many people like to text me or email me questions on the side, and we'll cover those at the end of the event. Jamie, just before we moved on, for the next cycle coming up, 2025, what do you anticipate are the dates that companies would need to apply to be in for company assistance and that sort of thing? There's usually by...
Yes, thanks, Rob. I didn't mention that. So normally we will put out the application in early November, and then applications will be due shortly after the new year. So companies basically have 2 months to work on it.
Great, thanks a lot. Okay, with that, thanks again, Jamie. I'd like to bring in Brian Suzuki from Hawaii Air Cargo. And the reason I asked Brian to speak today for a couple of minutes is just to get everybody introduced to a logistics partner, because I'm still concerned that a majority of our Hawaii companies are waiting until the last minute before they think about logistics. And when I say logistics, I really mean shipping. But as Brian can explain, there's a whole lot more to shipping than that. There are customs declarations and what have you. And I think that Australia and New Zealand are an interesting topic for us because we do have a free trade agreement with Australia. We don't have one with New Zealand. That can make things somewhat smoother. Our Australian speakers can explain a little bit about that later. But I'd really like our companies in Hawaii to think about shipping before they actually need to ship on a certain day. And I like to have Brian, as always, very considerate with his time and helps me whenever I need a logistics speaker. And I think he's great because he's really the godfather of air logistics in Hawaii, and it's wonderful to have him here. He's forgotten more about logistics than most of us will ever know. So I encourage you to contact Brian when you're thinking about getting ready to ship a product to Australia, New Zealand, or PPG or Fiji, because he can save you a lot of time, energy, and money, and make sure that things are done properly and turn that sale into as profitable a revenue generator as can possibly be. So with that, Brian, please welcome, and thank you for being here. We appreciate you taking time out of your day as well to introduce yourself and just share with the audience a little bit about the logistics concerns when shipping to Oceania.
Oh, thanks, Rob. Aloha, everyone. Again, he said Godfather, but actually it's just that I'm old. I've been at this airport, Honolulu International Airport, in and around the cargo airline industry for 56 years now. And for which they're wonderful years. But in those years, I've done a lot with Rob as well by teaching businesses and how to export, how to ship. People in Hawaii, we live here on islands, and a lot of people don't know. They just use the post office, FedEx, UPS, or whomever, which are all great reasons. But then for some reason, maybe your product will not fit in right. There might be another carrier that you're not using that might be better. So at any rate, I just wanted to mention that we are fortunate in Honolulu to have flights directly to New Zealand, Auckland, Sydney, Melbourne, Air New Zealand and Qantas Jetstar. They both fly out of here, not daily, but almost daily. And, they're handled pretty well. Unfortunately, they don't have their own sales office here. So you would have to contact their LA office, or that's the closest one, and they'll be able to help you. But in a nutshell, I wanted to mention the people at U.S. Commercial Services, USDA, terrific assistance. I've been to Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and use the services that are there. And it's really, really helpful to get to know for you exporters or would-be exporters to get to meet these people that are there in those countries to help you, your business gain strength and do well. As a matter of fact, a number of years ago, we went to a shipment. We were handling this one company. It's a small company. It was in the basement of downtown Honolulu, and they were shipping, I would say, every week 3 boxes to Japan, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. And these 3 boxes were actually frozen dough, going to pastry shops, going to restaurants, and then they decided to go to one of these trade shows, which was great. And then they became a big hit. From that 3 boxes a week, they started to ship one 40-foot container a week. They set up a distribution in Hong Kong, a distribution service, and they got so huge, they overgrew their facility. They got into a brand new facility, which lasted 3 years. And after 3 years, they couldn't keep up. They moved back to the mainland. I lost a customer, but they became a huge company based in Nevada to get better shipping rates. At any rate, I just want to mention that getting ahead of yourself by knowing your product, wherever you sell your product, even in Hawaii, your product, the way it looks, the way it's presented on the shelf or wherever, is very important. But at the same token, if you're not careful, you'll be paying for freight for the size of the shipment, because shipping by air, they're going to charge you by the actual weight or dimensional weight. Something that's very light and bulky, you'll be paying for the space it takes up. So it's very important that you know these things. One customer was shipping, I would say toys, but anyway, it was a simple thing, and yet when it was boxed and shipped, it took up a lot of space. So they were paying not only for the merchandise, but for the airspace. And the freight charges would double because of the way it was. So I worked with them and decided that the box that it went in should be kept in a separate box, folded up, flat. And those boxes, were small enough. The rest of the things that could be rolled up and put into those boxes were shipped flat. And the freight charges maybe went down 2/3 of what they're shipping initially. But that made a big difference for that company, because now they were able to compete with other people doing similar products. But I just wanted to mention that's very interesting. Plus, I wanted to warn you too that the air cargo industry in the US is not regulated, believe it or not, to the Deregulation Act back in, I guess, the mid-70s. But here, they can charge whatever they wish, and you may not even know it. And I mentioned you dimensional weight. The industry standard is length times width times height in inches. Length times width times height in inches, and we use the number 166 for international shipments. And whatever that comes out, it becomes a dimensional weight for that piece. Now, some people use 166, some people use 147, some people use one company, a major freight company. After I met with them, they told me, Brian, you can't match my price per pound. They were getting a real cheap price per pound, but they're being charged a dimensional weight factor that was so much higher that in 3 months or 5 months that they were shipping, I would have saved them $5,000 had they used my company instead of this other company. Even though the price per pound was less, they were paying a lot more for the dimensional weight factor. And again, I was mentioning that, but you have to be aware. The buyer has to be aware of this. There's a lot of things that are going on. People might give you that's a really good rate. At the same token, it might not be. It's just a come on type of thing. But at the same token, here in Hawaii, we import a lot of stuff. A lot of flights that come in from Asia and Australia, New Zealand. They come in with a lot of products, but they don't stop here. They just transfer from Hawaii, then they go beyond to LA, San Francisco, you know, Texas, Texas or Chicago, wherever it goes on and on. But the thing is that we have those flights going back a lot of times. And believe it or not, if you go to customs and you ask them, what are the exports that are coming out of Hawaii? There is a file, believe it or not. The file is because people that ship over $2,500 worth of merchandise has to file an export declaration with the customs for it to be put on a flight leaving Hawaii for a foreign destination. But of course, if you look at what's being shipped out of Hawaii, aircraft, all the planes that go down to Australia, it comes through Honolulu, but then when it leaves, this is the last part of export. So it's registered as an export from Hawaii, although we don't have any manufacturing of aircraft, airplanes. We have computers and other big exports through Hawaii, but very little other things. The small business person that might have a certain product that might be something that they could sell as a gift or whatever, those are kind of stuff, maybe they ship less than $2,500, therefore it's not registered. So you're not sure exactly what's in there. But until you go down there to visit our people with our government to find out what could be sold as a product for Hawaii, you'll never know. And by going down to, again, going to Australia and New Zealand, beautiful, beautiful place to go and visit. And then while you're there, good to learn about what they could possibly buy. I used to teach this class through HPC, Hawaii Pacific Export Council. I was teaching at the community college over at Kapilani by Diamond Head. And this was a night school, 2 nights class. People had to pay to get in. I wasn't paid, but I was a volunteer instructor. But a lot of the students, I would say 50% of the students there at night were flight attendants. They would go traveling around the world. They work for United, all these other international carriers, but they go to class to find out how they could import stuff from these countries that they go visit. So it's the same token, not only importing, they learn about how to export. And when they learn, the next thing you know, they have another business. They can retire from being a flight attendant and then get into the other business full time. So anyway, I just wanted to close here by saying there's a lot to learn, but it's also to your advantage as a potential business for exporting to learn more about it, to hear all the different points of view and see who's out there. And again, even FedEx and UPS, they haven't hit it. I told you about using 166. They use less than that to find the dimensional weight. So it might be a little more expensive because they might say, hey, we can get you cheaper rates, but they're charging you for the dimensional weight. Also to let you know too that UPS, USPS, FedEx, they all have delivery service at your foreign destination. The thing is that once it gets there, they will clear customs, but then when they deliver it, they will collect the duties and any other fees that might be applicable to your shipment. So it's best to know what to expect so that your buyer doesn't get caught and having to pay a lot more than they should pay. But some of the other carriers, the airlines like that, the consignee has to find their own customs broker, clear it, pick it up at the airport, or do whatever to go inland. So all those things are small little stuff, but then they add up. So it's best that you, I guess, now put your mind to it, go and visit Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and Fiji, and see what can I sell over here. And you'd be surprised. You might find something, a niche, and make it big business for you.
That's
Well, anyway,
great.
thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, there's a as Jamie mentioned, there's the Tokyo International Gift Show, and later we're going to hear about an Australia gift show that I think will be very interesting. So, again, thank you very much, Brian. It was great. And to our audience, please contact Brian or another freight forwarder, especially when it comes to air cargo. I just think it's very important to show them your product ahead of time and physically bring your product. And I'd like to put a plug in for an event that we're having later in October. This is a live event in person at the Foreign Trade Zone down on Ala Moana Boulevard at Pier 2. It's on October 25th. We're doing Export Day, but it's really a focus on logistics, and we'll have a lot of logistics providers there. Of course, Brian will be there, and many others talking about services that they can provide to help moving product out of Hawaii. But I encourage everybody to come on down and physically bring your product and show them what it is that you're trying to export and any specialties that are needed, whether it needs to be cooled or chilled or can't be exposed to heat or what have you. And I think it'll be very helpful, as well as bring your packaging to show them what it is you're trying to sell and how you package it. So that, again, that's October 25th, and you can find out more about that at invest.hawaii.gov under the export tab in the HISTEP area. So with that, I'd like to move on to our key presentations today. The first presenter is Lee Brayman. He's a commercial officer at the U.S. Commercial Service in Australia. He's based in Sydney. And again, we thank Lee and the other speakers that are coming up after Lee for taking time out of their busy business day and explaining to us and sharing their expertise about the Australia, New Zealand, and other markets down there. So with that, Lee, please begin and just tell me when you would like me to forward the slide to the next one.
Well, thank you, Rob. First thing I would like to say is I agree completely with what Rob and Brian are saying. You have to know your costs before you can quote a sale price to your clients. Talk to freight forwarders, talk to folks who understand the cost elements that will get your product from your door to your customer's door. That said, could we go to the next slide, please? The U.S. Commercial Service is a branch of the Department of Commerce, and our job is to help promote exports of U.S. products. As it was mentioned by Jamie, I believe more than 51% U.S. content is required to qualify for our services. But we are here to help you make introductions and get access to information in the market. We have offices in 77 countries around the world, and we have offices across the United States. Of course, the one that's most relevant to you is the one in Hawaii with John Holman. I cannot speak highly enough about John. He's a very innovative partner, and he's a great collaborator helping companies understand what they're trying to do. Another thing that we also specialize in is attracting foreign direct investment into the United States. We do these activities through a variety of methods. When you're trying to promote exports, we can do what are called gold keys. That's our standard service, where we pre-vet potential partners with you, and then you come over and meet and talk with them yourself. We can also do that virtually through our International Partner Search Plus program as well. We have a number of other services that we can provide. We can provide you some market intelligence reports. We can also, once you're ready to move into the market, potentially discuss a promotional strategy with you, where we develop a tailored solution to what you're trying to achieve. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, export assistance centers can be found in over 100 cities around the world, around the United States, and we have offices in over 75 countries around the world. We look forward to helping you. If you are looking at other markets, you can contact us and we can connect you with the right people. Or, of course, John Holman and Rob also have access to this network as well. Go to the next slide, please, Rob. Oceania. This is a underexplored market for a lot of exporters. Australia is obviously the big target. We'll talk in more detail about all of these, about the major markets here. But just so you know, Oceania and the Pacific Islands as a group, it's a total market of probably around 42 million people. Most of them are located in Australia. New Zealand has a nice population, as does PNG, Papua New Guinea. Next slide, please. Papua New Guinea. This is a country of 10 million people. It is the big gem of the Pacific Island countries. However, it is not a particularly wealthy country. I believe cell phone penetration is in the neighborhood of 35 to 40%. The number of people who have access to online shopping opportunities is significantly below that. GDP, though, has had good growth despite the COVID outbreak of 2020 and 2021. The economy is based on extractive industries, gold, oil, things like this. There's not much in terms of a tourist market here, i.e. Americans going there for tourism, or PNG citizens traveling from there to the United States. But as you can see, inflation is relatively stable currently, very strong employment. It is a developing nation. The US government has a number of programs through USAID and other entities to help stimulate more economic development. If your company is interested in this area, we can help connect you to the right folks here. In fact, in November 14th and 15th, the Asian Development Bank is sponsoring a business opportunity summit. We're bringing foreign businesses into Port Moresby, the capital of Papua New Guinea, to outline what ADB financing is going to be available in different sectors.
Sorry, real quick, Lee,
Rob?
with that acronym ADB, can you remind our audience what that stands for?
Sure, that's the Asian Development Bank. They're sort of like the World Bank, but they're focused on the Asian market.
Thank you.
Next slide, please, Rob. Fiji. Fiji, please. We went, yes, there you go. Again, this is the second largest market in the PICS. Again, it's less than 1 million people. It's a relatively wealthy country. Its industries basically are built around tourism, which represent about 70% of its GDP. And there's some agricultural and extractive industries also found there as well. As you can see, their GDP growth is relatively stable. They have not bounced back after the COVID epidemic the way they had hoped. They were on a much faster run rate prior to 2019, but it's still a positive story. Again, the size of the market is not huge. Unlike PNG, which has 10 million potential customers, ultimately, this is 1/10 the size. Fortunately, both Fiji and Papua New Guinea have very strong young consumer bases. So as the countries become more affluent, there will be more disposable income and there will be more consumption going forward, particularly if you're in the area of fashion, clothing, luxury, gift goods, things like this. But it may not be the time now. Next slide, please. New Zealand. New Zealand is a beautiful country. I've never had the benefit of going, but everybody I know who goes there says it's just fabulous. New Zealanders do travel to the United States. It is a wonderful place to go and to promote your destination. And it is a high-income country. Most of its GDP is around agricultural goods and, again, some extractive industries. Materials such as wool, other things like this are big exports. The GDP growth is relatively flat, as you can see, and again, strong employment. But again, there is a slowing of the population growth rate, so we're not expecting to see a lot of dramatic change in this market. We are hoping that someday there might be a free trade agreement, but it's probably not going to be anywhere in the future. And we'll talk about the benefits of a free trade agreement in our next country, Australia. Can we go to Australia, please? Australia, 27 million people. In my opinion, it is as attractive a market as Japan. High disposable incomes, very strong urban presences, lots of young people. However, again, the population demographic is relatively stable. We're not seeing a huge explosion of youth, but you see a solid growth in people who are in the consuming age categories or moving into the consuming age categories. Again, U.S. GDP is very strong. Growth is relatively good. It is slowing. There is a lot of concern domestically about cost of living. Rents are very high here. Food costs are relatively high. Most of the GDP growth occurs in extractive industries. As this declines in importance, as we've seen, there's sort of been a depressing effect globally on demand for iron, steel, coal, things like this. This will impact Australia's economic growth. However, roughly 70% of Australia's agricultural production is exported, a lot of it to the United States. Australia does have a free trade agreement with the US. An FTA is interesting because it indicates that both countries are aligned in their visions of economic growth. It does not mean that there are no customs declarations. It does not mean there are no tariffs, but it does mean that there should be a relatively knowable and foreseeable method for getting your documentation done correctly. And again, this is a very important reason for having a good freight forwarder as your partner. These folks can help you make sure that you've got the right forms in place at the right time. We do see Australia as being a great opportunity, particularly in the gifts clothing markets. Hawaii is a very famous brand. It is easy to attach your product to that and use that to help accelerate its growth. However, this is not marketing to your neighbor. Australians do have different perspectives in the world. You do have to understand your value proposition and explain it in a way that can help local people understand why your product's better than others. That's where the Foreign Commercial Service comes in. We have people in all 4 of these markets. They can help you understand what consumers are looking for, how to pitch your product in ways that will be different than the US, but make sense to the local consumers. That's about all I have to add, Rob. I'm going to turn it over to our experts who can talk about individual sectors and the opportunities in those. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. There's an excellent presentation, great overview. Here's your slide. I encourage everybody not to scramble and write these email addresses down or any of the contact information, because I will be sending around these presentations to all of our attendees, which will include their contact information and what have you. So please don't panic and do all of that stuff. Our next speaker, I want to give a special thanks to Rana Nushuat. She's a commercial specialist at the U.S. Commercial Service in Australia. She's also based in Sydney, but she really helped me put this webinar together and wrangle the troops down under to coordinate times and everything. So again, thank you, Rana. It was very helpful, and we really appreciate your efforts in that regard. Now, you're going to talk to us about consumer goods and other activities. So can you explain a little bit? First of all, if you don't mind, just be a little bit pedantic and tell us, you're based at the consulate in Sydney and that the embassy is in Canberra. Can you tell our audience, what is the difference between an embassy and a consulate? Some people may not be aware.
Yeah, hi, Rob, and it was a pleasure working with you. This is our 3rd webinar for Hawaii in the past 6 years, and we'll keep them going, you know, while people are benefiting from those. So yes, I am based in Sydney at the consulate. And we have 8 people actually working for the US Commercial Service in Australia, all around in Canberra, Perth, and Sydney. The main difference is that the embassy is where the ambassador resides, and all the government activities take place, while we support at the consulates in Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth, all the embassy activities. What we do is that we cover a lot of the sectors, or most sectors, but mine in specific are consumer goods, education, and building and construction. So for the sake of time, I'm going to briefly talk about consumer goods and education, but let me know if you have questions or you want me to jump in right into it.
Will do. No, please go ahead, and I have a few questions to ask.
Okay, excellent. So I'll touch a little bit on tourism, although I do not cover the sector, but I thought it might be interesting. So just last year, Hawaii was the 2nd most popular destination, US destination for Australians, and it sits right behind, after California and behind New York. So there was 270,000 Australians that visited last year, and there 19% of them are for leisure, and 50% were repeat travelers. And Australians generally spend an average of 9 days in Hawaii. The top activities, as you would imagine, sightseeing, shopping, dining, taking guided tours, and visiting national parks.
Can I
And
ask you, the average Australian gets how much vacation time or holiday time per year? I'm just trying to understand. 9 days is a long time. The average Japanese tourist doesn't spend 9 days here. It's more like 4 or 5. So I'm just curious. It seems like the Australians, if they're going to go on a holiday, they want to stay a while and get used to it. So I was just curious how many days a year do they
I
have?
believe we get 21 business days a year. And then you add those, around public holidays, etc.
Mm.
And people tend to not just go during, the summer holidays, which is our December, January, but also April during Easter and just before Christmas around November, where the prices are affordable. But talking about flights, actually, we have about 13 to 15 direct flights weekly between Australia and Hawaii.
That's great.
That kind of helps. But moving on to education, in 22, I don't have stats for 23, but in 22, Australia ranked number 14 in terms of international students to Hawaii. So there were about 76 students, and generally the trend is to study short to long-term exchanges and not much a degree-seeking, international student. The study focus is mainly natural sciences, especially marine science, and business with a tourism focus is also not uncommon. Um, the top sending universities from Hawaii to Australia, which is also a popular destination for Hawaiian students. So the top 3 sending universities are University of Hawaii at Hilo, and the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and the Hawaii Pacific University. So that's just for education. Now jumping on to cosmetics and sunscreen under the consumer goods, because it's a very broad range of products that sit under consumer goods, but specifically cosmetics and sunscreen. So it's valued at 6.6 billion US dollars, that industry, and growing by 5% annually. 45% of the cosmetics are imported. And as you would imagine, the multinational brands dominate the market. And some of the Hawaiian brands, for example, are the Hawaiian Tropic, which is sunscreen mainly. You have the Aloha Organic Skincare and Mali Organics, just to name a few. General trends in the market is that, the demand is driven by the aging population and a greater participation of by women in the workforce. But also we're seeing more trends with men using more skincare and looking after, their skin. It's worth noting that Australian consumers are not trendsetters, but they're early adopters of international brands. Just generally 3 points for people to keep in mind when they're breaking into the market for the cosmetics and sunscreen is that you need to be aware of the regulatory requirements and satisfy those. You need to have the appropriate labeling on your packaging, and you need a distributor. And quickly on regulations, cosmetics and sunscreens are regulated by the therapeutic claims they're making. So if there's therapeutic claims, then it's the Therapeutic Goods Administration that regulates that. And we're talking about primarily general cosmetics and sunscreen and essential oils. Even if the product says natural, organic, or healthy, if it doesn't make therapeutic claims, then it's regulated or managed by ACIS, which is the Australian Industrial Chemicals Introduction Scheme. Just
Wow,
quickly
that's quite an acronym. So I'm curious if I can interrupt for a second, because a lot of our sunscreen and cosmetics manufacturers will have tried selling product in Japan, where it can be difficult because a lot of preservatives and ingredients that are allowed in the US are not allowed in Japan. So a company that's sending product to Australia or perhaps New Zealand, somebody else can chime in on that. But what kind of testing protocol is done by an ACIS or what have you? Do you have any experience with that? Is it complicated and expensive?
Well, with ACAS, I believe it's less expensive because the distributor, or what we call is the importer of record, makes sure that the ingredients are listed with ACAS, and most of the time they would be listed there. So that's just a kind of a check on that. I'm not into the details of how the process works, but I know for sure that the TGA, which is it's similar. It's the Australian version of the FDA, but without the food part. They have very stringent regulations, especially on sunscreen, and I believe at some point, they stopped doing that during COVID, but they would send someone from their facilities to the manufacturing facility overseas, and they would do checks, and it costs a lot of money, and it takes a long time, over 6 months of, just, studying those products and where they're being manufactured. So yeah, it is stringent.
Okay. Very good.
In terms of distribution, we have the retail concentration is very high in Australia. So we basically have two department stores, which is Myer and David Jones, similar to Macy's and Bloomingdale's, if you want. We have specialist stores like Sephora and Mecca. Mecca is the Australian version of Sephora. And then we have a couple of pharmacy chains like Priceline and Chemist Warehouse. So basically, that is all to say that because of the retail concentration is high, we have a small number of distributors. And, keep in mind the population, as Lee mentioned, we have 27 million people. So, but the good news is that we have access to those distributors and we can connect you to them.
Excellent.
So
just to stay on the subject of sunscreens for a second, as you probably know, Hawaii has the strictest laws in the U.S. regarding sunscreens that are allowed due to potential damage to the coral and the reefs. Is that of interest to the Australian consumer? And because Australia has a very strong beach culture and environmental culture focused on reef protection and ocean protection. So I'm just curious if that translates at all to the Australian market.
Most definitely. In 2021, more and more states in Australia started issuing bans on harmful chemicals that are usually found in sunscreens, like I believe it's Oxidon, and there was other chemicals that I don't know even how to pronounce, but because of the coral reefs and the Great Barrier Reef and its effect. So definitely it's similar to Hawaii in that regards.
Great. Thank you. I think you heard Jamie mention earlier that a big part of what DBET does locally in Hawaii is help our exporters with trade shows. And one of the biggest trade shows that DBET is involved in is the Tokyo International Gift Show, or often called TIGS. But I know that there's something similar like that in Sydney. Can you tell us a little more detail about that?
Oh yeah, of course, because that's been the Sydney Gift Show has been in the works for about 3 years now. So we are working on establishing a US pavilion for the first time, and it's going to happen in February, between 13th and 15th of February 2025. We are currently recruiting for interested exhibitors. We aim for 10 booths as part of that pavilion, and it's basically, so we're trying basically to create awareness about some of the US products that are not always highlighted. Buyers, just to mention some of the products that buyers seek, is they look for handmade products, gifts is another top category, health and well-being, homewares, lifestyle products, and tech and accessories, just to name a few. And it's we're looking forward to connecting with anybody who's interested. So please reach out to me, and I'll give you more details.
Great. Can you also explain a little bit about this Naturally Good Expo and the Beauty Expo?
The Naturally Good Expo is just another popular event when it comes to healthy products, organic, natural products in the skincare, beauty, and food industries. I've attended it, and it is popular. It's based in Sydney. The Beauty Expo also is more focused on the beauty, makeup, hair, and those categories, body contouring, and but yeah, these are just a few, but the top popular ones in Australia. There's also the Melbourne Gift Show, happens also, I believe, every year, but the Sydney one is what we were focused on this year.
The Beauty Expos in Sydney also?
Yes, also all of them are in Sydney.
Do you know of any surf-related, very beach-oriented expos that occur in Australia?
I looked that up actually, but I couldn't find anything that's happening anytime soon. There used to be a surf expo or a festival, but not in terms of a trade show where you can attend. But if there's anything, I would definitely pass it on to you.
Well, that would be great. Thank you.
And that's it from me.
Yeah,
Unless you have questions.
That was it for now. I'll wait till the end if there are any more questions that come in from the attendees. But that was extremely helpful, Rana. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Okay, let's jump over to agricultural products. And we have Renee Pizzuta. She's in Australia. And Anna Popovich is in New Zealand. And Renee, if you can hear me.
Yep.
Please tell us a little bit about what does the Foreign Agriculture Service do? And you're based in Canberra, right? So you must be at the embassy.
I am. I'm at the embassy in Canberra, and Anna is in the embassy in Wellington.
Okay, great. So if you could just tell us a little bit about the Foreign Agriculture Service and how you can help small companies in Hawaii that are selling, as I've told you before, all kinds of things, but increasingly we have alcohol manufacturers, we have beef, which I know is verboten in Australia, but jerkies and jellies and cookies and all kinds of things. So please.
Yep. So the Foreign Agricultural Service, we're posted all around the world. We're a branch of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We wear many hats, but for this purpose, we help U.S. companies and industries enter the market into Australia and New Zealand in this instance. Our office actually just picked up the Pacific Islands as well. We're still breaking into that market and understanding what the regulations are for that. So we're definitely not experts in the Pacific Islands at the moment. But yeah, so our main goal is to help US companies get into Australia in the food and beverage area, introduce them to buyers and distributors, and be able to expand throughout Australia.
Great. You may have heard I had a previous question to Rana about testing of cosmetics or sunscreens or what have you. A lot of our manufacturers will have had a little bit of experience with Japan and find testing for food and similar things is quite stringent, probably more stringent than the US would be for incoming products from another nation. So I'm really curious, what's your experience with selling cookies or something with preservatives in it? How does that work for Australia? Is that a difficult procedure to get products into the market?
So Australia and New Zealand have really strict biosecurity rules. There were both islands, so we want to keep out as much as possible. Australia and New Zealand, they have the same food standards code. So it's called Food Standards Australia New Zealand, FSANZ for short. They decide what ingredients are allowed, and they actually have all of that up on on their website. So they have all that information readily available. Australia also has a really good database called BICON, which is the biosecurity import conditions. All you do is you type in what product you're trying to import, and it usually comes up with if it's allowed, what the conditions are, if it requires a permit. That's a really, really good database for Australia. I'm not sure if New Zealand has that sort of database, or do you know, Anna?
Yeah, it's a little bit more tricky in New Zealand. Firstly, aloha and kia ora, everyone.
Hello.
Um, yes, so it's a little bit more tricky in New Zealand, especially around labeling and packaging. But your best bet for New Zealand is go to the Ministry of Primary Industries, that's MPI for short, and that's about the same kind of Australian equivalent there. It doesn't sound like it's as user friendly, but the people on the other side of the emails will be friendly and be able to answer all your questions, whether it's allowed into the country and things like that.
Great.
Another thing,
Sorry,
sorry,
Renee. Sorry to interrupt you, Renee. Can you repeat that acronym you said? FSANZ, FSANZ,
FSANZ, so Food
FSANZ.
Standards Australia, New Zealand.
Food Standards Australia, New Zealand. Okay, thank you.
So another thing with FSANZ, with food labeling, is that it's regulated by FSANZ. So Australia and New Zealand have the same food labeling regulations, which is different than the US. But one good thing is that you can sticker over your label, so you don't have to completely reprint your labels to bring it into Australia or New Zealand. You can just sticker over it, which is extremely helpful.
That is very helpful. So how about alcohol? I know that they drink down under, and it's a big export growing for Hawaii. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so distilled spirits was the third biggest product that was imported into Australia from the US, so that we had $130 million worth of distilled spirits brought into Australia last year. One hard part about alcohol is that there's extremely high taxes. So it's called an excise tax, and that actually gets reevaluated every 6 months, and it pretty much goes up every 6 months. So a bottle of spirits in the US, which costs $40, could cost up to $120 to $130. So that's one thing to consider when you are trying to get into Australia. But we have been pushing quite hard to try and freeze that excise, and that excise is for every spirit. It's not just imported spirits, so even domestic spirits get that excise tax.
I see. Okay, so our products would not necessarily be more expensive than French wine coming in or Chinese liquor or something, right?
Wine also has a completely different tax format.
Sure.
So that's a whole nother story.
How about in New Zealand, Anna? Do you have any experience with the importation of alcohol or?
Yeah, absolutely. In general, New Zealand does import a lot of alcohol. With Hawaii specific, for example, last year, for those that know, Jason Momoa launched his Hawaiian vodka here in New Zealand, and that kind of opened the awareness of the New Zealand consumers, and everyone's kind of looking like, oh, what else does Hawaii have to offer? Just because it's got that, celebrity endorsement. This kind of put Hawaii on the map here in New Zealand, so it would make sense for now Hawaiian exporters of spirits to jump on that leverage and then enter the market in New Zealand. It's pretty good timing now.
Great. I know getting beef from the US into Australia is it impossible or just extremely difficult?
At the moment, it is not allowed.
Okay.
We are hoping within 2025 it will be approved. We've been working very hard with Australia to allow it. We're right at the tip, but we haven't quite crossed the line yet.
How about New Zealand, Anna?
Yeah, in terms of New Zealand, we make a lot of beef. We don't import a lot of beef. It is allowed, but yeah, it's not too popular here to import beef. Yeah.
Okay. And have you any experience with the brood stock shrimp that's exported from Hawaii? That's actually a very significant export from Hawaii to Asia. I'm just curious if you have any experience with that locally.
I couldn't find any information on that, but I believe Anna has some.
Okay.
Yeah, just a little tidbit there. So New Zealand already imports a small amount of broadstock shrimp from Hawaii, Thailand, and Israel. And then there's been a lot of interest here in New Zealand for the broadstock shrimp to help reintroduce genetic variability into the prawn populations. I'm not a prawn expert, but those that are will know what I'm talking about.
Great. Sorry, somebody just texted me a question asking about beer, and not what is my favorite beer, but is beer lumped in with wine, or how does that classify?
I think beer is, I'm actually not completely sure. So it's only wine that has the wet tax. Beer might fall under the spirits excise tax, but I will have to get back to you on that.
Okay, great. Yeah, we do have a lot of beer manufacturers, several that make some very good craft beer and are starting to export. So I'd like them to hear what you have to say on that.
Australians love their beer, so that would be.
Yes, in fact, one of the best words I learned on my first trip to Australia many, many years ago was a can of beer they called a tinny. And I just thought
tinny, yeah.
I thought that was a wonderful term. Okay. Are there any trade shows that are agriculture, fine food, or alcohol related that you would recommend in Australia, New Zealand?
Yeah, so our biggest recommendation is Fine Food Australia, which is it's the biggest food and beverage trade show in the Southern Hemisphere, and it is also endorsed by the USDA. So we have a big USA pavilion, which if you're a part of WASADA or any of the state organizations, you could be able to get funding to come over and exhibit. So that this trade show takes place in September every year, and it alternates between Sydney and Melbourne. This year, 2025, it'll take place in Sydney. We've actually had a few Hawaiian companies exhibit in the last few years. For the last 2 years, the Hawaii Department of Agriculture was an exhibitor, and they were exhibiting a lot of the Hawaii-made products. 2 years ago, we had a distillery from Hawaii. I actually have their little coaster right here. And then they had some pretty good success. So we would definitely love to have an expanded Hawaii presence at the USA Pavilion.
That's great. Do you know our Hawaii Department of Agriculture? Are you speaking with somebody there on a regular basis about that stuff?
Yeah, so Brendan,
Yeah,
I'm not
Brendan.
sure what his
Sure.
last name. Yep, so he was here exhibiting for the last 2 years.
Oh, fantastic. Did any companies come with him?
No, so he was just exhibiting on behalf of them.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
And Anna, anything that you're aware of in the New Zealand market?
Yeah, there's Fine Food New Zealand. This trade show is held biannually, and the next show is actually in June next year, so 2025. And this tends to draw about 500 to 800 exhibitors. Every year, we also have a thing called the Food Show, which takes place in 3 of New Zealand's largest cities, Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch. These trade shows are more popular among consumers than buyers. So exporters tend to have a lot of value there in terms of testing the market and product exposure and things like that.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you, ladies. That was an excellent overview of the Foreign Agriculture Service. So there may be some questions at the end. So thanks again for that.
No problem. Thanks.
Of course. Our next speaker is Janet Colehart. She's in New Zealand. She's with the U.S. Commercial Service based in Wellington. And Janet, welcome. Can you
Hi, thank you very much. Well,
Yes.
I've had some technical issues. Can you hear me, Rob?
We can hear you and we can see you perfectly. So your issues have
that's
been
wonderful.
overcome. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's good. Honestly, I thought I was going to be down for a wee while. It's been disconnecting.
Can you tell us very briefly what is the size of the cities that Anna just mentioned? Wellington, Christchurch, and Auckland. Those are the three largest cities. I probably didn't get the order correct. But,
no, you did very well. So Auckland is our main city, and it's about 1.2 million people. And then south of Auckland, we have Wellington, which is around about 450,000 people. And then in our South Island, we have our largest South Island city, which is Christchurch, and that services the entire South Island, really. And it's about the same size as Wellington, 450. So
right.
altogether, we're about 5.1 million people in a state of the size maybe of Colorado.
Wonderful. But it is a fantastically beautiful country. And I recommend, as Lee did earlier, if anybody from Hawaii has the opportunity to go to New Zealand, please do it because it's physically just fantastic. Okay. So with that, Janet, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the commercial service? And I know you just had a fairly big contingent from Hawaii visit you soon. Maybe you could just briefly explain a little bit about who they were, what were they doing there?
Well, first of all, thank you for your kind comments, and hello, everybody. I'm based in Wellington, New Zealand, and I've been at the embassy a very long time. And over the course of that time, I've been to Hawaii maybe 5 or 6 times. And the very first time I went was direct from Auckland to Hawaii, where we got off the plane and got onto a wiki. And that was how we traveled. We just could not do direct flights to the mainland of the US. But Hawaii has retained its popularity. There were 50,000 odd people who went to Hawaii last year. And that's a big percentage of the total number of New Zealanders who traveled. Around 250,000 people went to the States last year. So we love Hawaii. It's really popular. You're warm, you're sunny, and there's many Polynesian connections. So with the tourism side of things that we share, there's a lot going on. There's the Hawaii Tourism Oceania, which is based in New Zealand, and it covers Australia and Singapore. And last month, they brought down a travel and tourism delegation. So there was around about 18 people in that group. They were travel agents who support hotels, attractions, all sorts of things that you would want to do if you're a Kiwi going up to Hawaii. And they were great people, lots of music, lots of dancing.
Great. In your experience, then, you said you've worked for the embassy for a very long time. So thank you for that on behalf of Americans. Thank you for your hard work on behalf of American companies in New Zealand. What are you seeing that New Zealand consumers would like from Hawaii? And so let me backtrack and ask a broader question too. It's your experience then that Hawaii and things like aloha, the words and the meaning, have already some market understanding in New Zealand?
Oh, yes. I think it was Lee who said it's a brand, and it is. Everyone knows Hawaii, and it's just, it is something that you see in your mind as sunny and the beach, the surf. And there are similarities with New Zealand when it comes to that type of thing. We all know about the apparel, the Hawaii shirts. So in terms of what we would like to see from Hawaii, I think maybe Anna might be able to slip in here with the food and snacks, as that's one sector where I think it could grow. The main sector, though, is computers and electrical equipment. And Rob, we talked about this earlier, that sometimes the trade data doesn't really reflect what's coming into the country. Correct. So it could be that we're not capturing exactly what is coming in. But at the moment, when we look at data, computers and electrical equipment are way up. But there is a big opportunity for other goods, the soaps, the apparels, the jewelry, and of course the food and the snacks. So Anna, are you in a position where you could just chip in a little bit about what sort of
Yeah.
snacks we might be eating?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. There's definitely room to grow here. In general, New Zealand shows interest in Hawaiian products. They're seen as exotic, tropical, and high quality. Things like macadamia nuts, coffee, tropical fruits like pineapple, mango. And sometimes some unique sauces or condiments. These pique the interests of consumers here in New Zealand. We don't really have the right climate here to grow a ton of exotic fruits, so we like to import as much as we can. We've got the taste for them, especially as New Zealand's got a high Pacific population. We also often appreciate products that kind of highlight Hawaiian culture and flavors, like poke sauce, teriyaki sauce, spicy chili water, those kinds of things. New Zealanders also love our coffee. Hawaiian coffee, especially Kona coffee, is loved for its flavors, and it's often sought after here in New Zealand. It's seen as premium and high quality.
Right. And so New Zealanders understand, or they know the word poke. That's a part of the New Zealand dialect now.
The
I don't
foodies
know
of
that
New
word.
Zealand definitely.
Oh,
The
that's great.
foodies of New
Oh,
Zealand do.
Anna does. She's the foodie.
That's great. Okay. No, that's really wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. Let's see. How about Janet? You mentioned tourism a little bit. Are our efforts from Hawaii, are they reaching New Zealand in terms of drawing tourists? Is there room for that to grow, or is 50,000 about as good as
I
we can
think we
expect?
would like to see more from this country go up to Hawaii. At the moment, the Hawaii Airlines, which services this market, they're having a little break. Winter's not a great time for Hawaii tourists to come to New Zealand. So
Right.
you've got to keep your planes full. So at the moment, that plane is not working. It will pick up again in November. So that is why the Hawaii tourism people were down. They wish to keep the visibility of Hawaii up, and they do a good job. We do
Right.
love Hawaii, so I
Right.
think you'll see the numbers pick up. Internally in the New Zealand market, we are a little flat with the economy. There has been a lot of public servants who have lost their positions because the government is reducing the number of public servants. We've lost about 6,000 in Wellington. And as a flow-off event from that, there are private sector companies which are closing down because of the cost of energy. So New Zealand's always been probably an unaffordable destination for a lot of people, but it's a beautiful country. Things are expensive, and they're just getting a little tighter for some people at the moment. But this is, a blimp, and we will see perhaps next year things will improve.
Great. Thinking again for our Hawaii companies interested in doing business in New Zealand, Anna had mentioned some food trade shows or agricultural related trade shows. Are there any consumer related trade shows we should be thinking about that are annual or biannual?
Yes. We have an annual gift fair which takes place in Christchurch and Auckland each year. But based on what you may know from US trade shows, our shows are a lot smaller, but they are open to having visitors from overseas exhibit. So Hawaiian companies that are interested in exhibiting at these two gift shows would be most welcome. We, as New Zealanders, though, are very used to getting on planes, and we will be promoting the trade show in Sydney that Rana raised, the gift show, which is in February. So there should be a large contingent from New Zealand at that show. And we would also be remiss if I didn't mention the Field Days event. So Field Days is actually an agribusiness event. It takes place in June, which is our winter, but they have an enormous households show at Field Days. And it's a wonderful time if you want to buy new soaps or new clothes or new jewelry. So really, it's a great fit for Hawaiian products as well. And
Great.
if anyone would like to know more about it, just contact me. I'm happy to share.
I've never heard of that. Where is that specific?
So it's in a place called Hamilton, which is 2 hours south of Auckland, Auckland being our big city. Hamilton's actually growing quite large as well. It's becoming quite a regional hub for business. So it's not hard to get to, and I'm happy to help with anybody who's interested in that event.
Great, that's wonderful. Do you have any understanding about the education market in terms of how many students might be coming from New Zealand to Hawaii?
Rana pulled off some figures for us. My colleague is based in Auckland. He handles the education sector, but there was a figure of 67 Kiwis there in Hawaii at the moment, which we thought was amazing.
Yeah,
but it just shows, I think, the Polynesian connections between the two countries.
That's great. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that market overview, Janet. It sounds like our companies here should be investing some more time and energy in the New Zealand market. With that, I'm going to open it up to general questions that have come in. And if you bear with me a second, I'm going to switch over my screen and share something else.
Rob, there's a question on the Australian Gift and Homeware show. That is the same show that I mentioned earlier, which is the Sydney Gift Show.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Thanks for your question, Sue.
Do you have any experience with licensing of, are there American companies that license their recipes, for example, to make an ice cream or a drink or something, and rather than shipping that product from the US, they find a distributor or somebody interested in Australia or New Zealand and just licensing the recipe and making it there locally?
I'm not quite familiar with that. I know a few like big alcohol companies will send over their some of their products, and like because our ready to drink drinks are really popular here, so they'll send over the spirit and then make the Coke in the can here, but I'm not quite sure about other products like ice cream.
Okay. There was one question I wanted to comment on, and I forgot to ask it earlier. Commonly, I hear in Commonwealth countries, but particularly Australia, New Zealand, there's a business term called a VAT, and the average American has not been exposed to that acronym before, value-added tax. Can you explain that a little and how that works, and just so our companies are aware of that? I don't know who's best, probably Rana.
Yeah, I'm not the best one to answer that one.
I can talk about it in terms of just New Zealand. Here we actually call it GST, which is just general goods and service tax. Yeah, so here it's 15% on all products. And so when you're, for example, at the supermarket, you see a bottle of Coca-Cola and you see that it's $4, that includes the 15% GST or VAT tax, rather than going up to the checkout and having a surprise because your bill is 15% extra. That's in terms of New Zealand, how it works here.
Great.
So it is the same thing here, except it's 10%.
Great. And can that vary by state? So or municipality? So for example, in Sydney and New South Wales, there could be multiple. So like in Honolulu, the sales tax is higher than in other parts of the state of Hawaii. So just curious.
No, it's 10% across the whole country, I believe.
Yeah. Okay, great. This is a general question for Lee, if he's still here, but Rana and Janet maybe will answer, and then Jamie, if Jamie's still here, she could chime in, although I know she had to leave. Whether the Gold Key service, if you could explain that a little, and then if the Gold Key service can be paid for through the HISTEP program.
Sure, I'm happy to address that. A Gold Key service is we talk with and counsel the client about their product. We discuss whether or not it has capacity to have attraction in the market that we're targeting. We then take that information, we reach out to our network, and we will endeavor to set up 5 in-person meetings in one day. It does tend to require, well, it does require travel to the market. As I said, there's a virtual service that replicates this called the International Partner Search Plus. I never really suggest doing things virtually, particularly for first meetings.
Yeah.
Seeing someone in person is very valuable. Tying a gold key service to attendance at a trade show can be a very valuable investment for a small company. Coming over for the gift show here in Sydney, we set up gold keys either the day before or the day after, so you can follow up or start a discussion with a potential partner. Yes, STEP funds, to my understanding, can be used to pay for this. We've done this with STEP funds in other places. The high STEP funds act the same, and as you indicated, or Jamie indicated earlier, that can help certainly offset a lot of the travel costs at a minimum as well.
Right. Jamie, can you comment on that? As I recall, Lee, I've used the Gold Key service myself dozens and dozens of times around the world, and for clients that I recommended to them. When last I did this a few months ago, it was still about $900 for a small company. Is that roughly what we're talking about?
I believe the price is $900, $950. It's certainly in that. It's not an onerous cost.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so you would find up to 5 potential customers or even distributors and run some checks on them to see that they're legitimate businesses. And
we would pre-vet them, right, and they would be known to us prior to the introduction. One of the things I like to counsel here is, again, remember I mentioned that quite often when you say a value proposition to another American, it resonates, but it may not with someone from Japan, or may not with someone from Germany. It also may not with someone from Australia. Often it is worthwhile doing what I call a educational GKS. That's where you come over and you talk to market players and you figure out, well, if you're not interested in my product, why? What about it could be made better? What about it? How can I talk about it in a way that makes more sense to you? Quite often, a lot of these distributor companies and these potential partners are dealing with dozens, if not hundreds, of queries each week or each month for product lines. And if you're not hitting them exactly at the right time, at the right place, you aren't going to get the feedback that you want. When you're in front of them and you're talking to them and you're holding that product, you get a lot better intel. And also, quite frankly, Rob, having been a small business person for 25 years, again, as I mentioned, talking about the value of having a good freight exporter, it's remarkably valuable sometimes to be told, no, this isn't the right market for you. And if you have to, better to spend $7,000 to learn that than to invest $50,000 in inventory, putting it on consignment, having some guy, come back to you and say it can't be sold, than saying, hey, let me just liquidate it for you and then we'll call it even. That's a much bigger impact on a small business. So the in-person element with people that are connecting you via the U.S. Embassy, using the power of the U.S. government to make sure that these meetings are, the topic is known, both sides are pre-connected, you have background on both, you get right to the necessary discussions faster. And that's why the gold key is invaluable, particularly in the SME section.
I absolutely agree. And Jamie, can you confirm that
Sure, yes.
You're going to sign the check for that?
Yeah, he is right. Yes, the high step funds can be used for Gold Key or any other, U.S. commercial service product or service that they offer. Because we've had companies that have used some of the other ones that forgot what it was. One that is it ICP? Anyway, they
ICP,
had like
ICP
a background check on somebody that they were going to do business with, or even one of our companies, and he's actually used a lot of information from that. They've used the Rural Export Center, their RAISE reports that they did customized market research for this one company, a company, a coffee company actually on Hawaii Island, as to the viability of certain markets. And he's actually used that in moving forward and has plans. So,
Wonderful.
yes.
Okay, great. The final question is just sort of a general economic, macroeconomic issue. It's no secret the U.S. dollar is very strong. It's very, very strong against the Australian dollar, the New Zealand dollar. Maybe the question's a little bit too large, but are you seeing this affecting U.S. exports, Hawaii exports to Australia and New Zealand, because our products right now are very expensive? I'm just curious what you're hearing from other people in the market, and do you expect any change in that?
I'm happy to chip in for New Zealand, and the answer is yes. So at the moment, one New Zealand dollar equals around 62 US cents. So it's not 50%, but it does make a huge difference when you start adding shipping and other costs like, exchange rates. So we have found that it is a little more difficult to find a distributor for a product because they're very discerning. We're an island. So if they buy something and they can't sell it, then they're in big trouble. So that's my perspective.
Thank you.
And I'd like to throw out here that, again, a product is as valuable as you're willing to pay for it. If you're trying to compete with an identical spark plug that you can get out of China for 20 cents compared to your $2, you're not going to sell that spark plug. However, if that spark plug reduces gasoline consumption by 80% and increases fuel performance of the engine or extends the life by 2 years, that's a totally different value proposition. And it's what you as a company are able to do with your product and how you separate it and differentiate it in the markets, what's going to make the difference, regardless of the strength or weakness of the dollar. Hawaiian shirts are unique. You can't replicate them. You can maybe make something that looks like a Hawaiian shirt, but it's not going to have the same quality, the same feel, the same life that you're going to get than a real Hawaiian shirt. How you're able to sell that and convince someone to pay $80, that's your job. Our job is to get you to the people who can get you to those distribution channels that will allow you to reach those consumers.
That's a very good way to put it. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. All right, so I'm going to start wrapping up here. Before I do, I like to go through everybody's website really quickly and just show our attendees where they can get more information. So here's the DBET HISTEP site. If you go to invest.hawaii.gov, there's an exporting tab here. Click on that and it takes you straight to HISTEP. And as Jamie mentioned during her talk, this will be updated very soon to include 2025. We're just coming to the end of the 2024 cycle right now. This is my organization I volunteer with, is the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. This is our YouTube archive, where we have a vast library of recordings of these types of events, which this one will be on in a few days after I've edited it a little bit and prepared it for uploading. So look for an email that will come from me with links to the presentations, as well as a link to the newest video that's here. Here's Brian Suzuki's website at Hawaii Air Cargo. Lots of information here. I suggest you contact Brian or somebody like him before you start exporting, or certainly before you start shipping. Here's some information on the U.S. Commercial Service in Australia at trade.gov. Similarly, our friends in New Zealand, and then the Foreign Agriculture Service, where Renee and Anna work for. So with that, I'd like to thank very much our speakers. We had Jamie Lum from DBET. Thanks to DBET and SBA for the grant that allows us to put on these webinars and the one-on-one company mentoring sessions. Thanks to Brian Suzuki, to Lee Brayman in Australia, also to Rana, and a special thanks to her for helping put all of this together, Janet in New Zealand, and Renee and Anna at the Agriculture Service. You all did a wonderful job. We greatly appreciate you putting a lot of time and effort into putting this program together and giving talks and answering questions that are related to Hawaii companies, and not just offering some generic answers, but really spending time and digging in and looking for Hawaii specific answers. It's greatly appreciated, and we thank you again. I'd like to just remind everybody we have our Export Day focused on logistics that's coming up October 25th. That's an in-person event. Look for emails coming out and how to register and come to that. It's totally free event, but I think it's important. And bring your products down and talk to the logistics companies about what you're trying to ship. We also have an export plan writing workshop I'm doing with a detailed template I have on October 17th. If you, again, it's all completely free. If you're interested in attending that event, please just contact me directly and I'll make sure you get an invitation. So with that, let me sign off. This is Rob Hack with the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. Our event today was exporting to Australia and New Zealand from Hawaii. We also thank everybody for teaching us a little bit about Papua New Guinea and Fiji. So with that, mahalo, and thanks again to our speakers and attendees. We enjoyed having you. Bye.